Hello everyone, welcome to ManageEngine's webinar on the first Patch Tuesday of 2020. The new year is here and so are our updates from Microsoft. I once again welcome you all to ManageEngine's Patch Tuesday webinar. Thank you for taking time off to join us in this session. Let me introduce myself. I'm Kartika and I'm a product specialist at ManageEngine. Today, I will be walking you through this discussion on the Patch Tuesday updates. So before we dive into our Patch Tuesday update discussion, let's take a few minutes to understand what Patch Tuesday is. Patch Tuesday falls on the second week of every month, and it is on this day that Microsoft releases security, non-security, third-party updates to fix vulnerabilities, to improve or enhance its OS and OS-related products. So if you are a system administrator or a person who is in charge of managing a ton of endpoints, this is a very hectic time of the month for you. And we at ManageEngine want to make it as easy as possible for you. So this session is going to be a quick 45-minute session wherein we'll be discussing about the Patch Tuesday updates that were released and on ways to handle these updates. So this is what we have planned for you guys today. First up, we'll be starting with the latest cybersecurity news, after which we'll have a complete breakdown of Patch Tuesday updates. Following that, we'll be analyzing the impacts and effects of disregarding these updates, after which I will be suggesting few best practices for patch management. Before we get into our session, I would just like to let you guys know that this session is being recorded and a recorded version will be sent to your registered email IDs in a day or two. Further, if you guys have any questions or queries in between the session, feel free to use the chat box. I have an expert panel sitting right next to me who would love to help you out with them. On that note, let's move on. So what's hot on cybersecurity? Let's take a look at the top 3 vulnerabilities or exploits that made it to the headlines. First up, we have the zero-day vulnerability in Firefox. Most of you guys must have come across this. On January 8th, just one day after Firefox 72 was released, Mozilla hurriedly issued Firefox 72.0.1, which included a patch with a vulnerability identified as CVE 2019-17026. The instantaneous action was due to the fact that this vulnerability was already being exploited in the wild in targeted attacks. So what is the scope of this vulnerability? The Firefox flaw was a type confusion bug in the JIT compiler of SpiderMonkey, the browser's JavaScript engine. This vulnerability can allow an attacker to quietly break into a victim's computer by tricking the victim into accessing a website running malicious JavaScript code. Eho360, who discovered this vulnerability, have not been very forthcoming with the details of how it has been exploited or who were hit. But let's not risk it, you guys. Update to the latest version of Mozilla Firefox as soon as possible. We see a tremendous increase in vulnerabilities that hit browsers. In such a scenario, it is advisable to have a browser security product in place. We at ManageEngine have Browser Security Plus, a product that exclusively takes care of browser-related risks. On that note, let's take a look at the second thing on the list. We have unmitigated Citrix systems under attack. This came as quite a scare. A vulnerability in Citrix Application Delivery Controller, ADC, formerly known as NetScaler ADC, and Citrix Gateway, formerly known as NetScaler Gateway, was identified a month ago. If exploited, this vulnerability with the CVE ID CVE 2019-19781 has the potential to allow attackers to perform arbitrary code execution in the targeted system. So what do? Citrix released mitigation steps almost immediately and has asked its users to follow them until they come up with a permanent fix in the form of a firmware update. You can find the steps for mitigation in the below mentioned URL. But it's been over a month now, and we're still yet to hear from Citrix regarding this permanent fix. The attackers, on the other hand, have been busy, and multiple attempts at exploiting this vulnerability has already been made over the past few days. The fact that the proof of concept is published and available over the internet is not helping the cause. A survey by Mush turned up over 25,000 vulnerable machines running Citrix in around 122 countries, which could easily be exploited in a ransomware or crypto mining attack if it comes to that. All we can do now is to follow the mitigation steps and keep our fingers crossed and hope that Citrix releases the firmware update at the earliest. Let's move on to the next one. We have the crypto API vulnerability. The most popular vulnerability award of the month probably goes to this vulnerability. Pretty much all cybersecurity forums were buzzing with apprehension regarding the crypto API vulnerability before the Patch Tuesday updates were out. The crypto vulnerability in Windows 10 machines is a spoofing vulnerability affecting the Windows crypto API, crypto32.dll. Labeled as CVE 2020-0601, the vulnerability was discovered and reported to Microsoft by the NSA. So what does this do? The flaw allows an attacker to sign a malicious executable file using a fake code signing certificate. This can be used to make a victim believe that the file is from a trusted source. So this bug could be used for man-in-the-middle attacks and decrypt confidential information on user connections to the affected software. NSA has released a separate security advisory where it calls the vulnerability severe and says that sophisticated actors will understand the underlying flaw very quickly. Microsoft, however, has labeled it important, citing it has not been exploited yet and has no proof as to being exploited. But why leave it to chance? Since the patches for this vulnerability has been released this Patch Tuesday, it is best to apply them right away. With that, we wrap up the cybersecurity news. Before we move into the Patch Tuesday updates, I have some announcements to be made. As most of you are already aware of, Windows 7 has attained its end of life on January 14, 2020. So this is the last Patch Tuesday in which Windows 7 has received free security updates. From now on, Windows 7 will not receive any security updates or tech support. Windows 7 users have two options now. They can either migrate to the later versions of Windows 10, or they can avail the Windows 7 extended security updates. These updates will be available through January 2023 at a paid subscription, and the cost increases by the year. Likewise, we have Internet Explorer 10, which is about to expire on January 31, 2020. And we have Windows 10 version 1709, which has its end of life on April 14, 2020. Patch Manager Plus and Desktop Central forums regularly make such announcements on such news items. So please follow our forums to know more on this. That said, let's move into the analysis of the Patch Tuesday updates. 617 patches have been released in January 2020 Patch Tuesday, and all of them are supported by Desktop Central and Patch Manager Plus. 50 vulnerabilities have been patched, out of which 8 are termed critical and 41 are termed important. Next up, we have a Patch Tuesday update distribution. As you can see, we have 9 bulletins, 144 patches, 39 updates, 50 vulnerabilities, and 6 impacts this Patch Tuesday. Next up, you can see a distribution of patches by impact. 21 patches cause elevation of privilege when unpatched. Followed by that, we have 12 vulnerabilities which cause remote code execution, and 7 vulnerabilities which cause information disclosure, and 4 which cause denial of service. Next up, we have a distribution of patches by severity. As you can see, most of the patches fall under the important severity, and about a quarter of them, less than actually a quarter of them, fall into the critical category. So this is a table of all the critical vulnerabilities. Like I said before, there are 8 critical vulnerabilities this Patch Tuesday. The vulnerabilities that have been marked in red are considered extremely dangerous, and these are vulnerabilities in remote desktop gateway. They are considered severe because Malware Tech tweeted on Wednesday saying that they have got a crash proof of concept working on one of the remote desktop gateway bugs. Marcus Hutchins has further followed up with another tweet saying that these bugs are not theoretical problems and they allow for remote code execution on the gateway server with privileges of NT authority and network service. So I would suggest you guys to start your patching process by deploying these patches first, followed by the other patches. Moving on, we have a graph that depicts the OS or applications affected. 36 patches have been released for Windows. 6 vulnerability has been addressed in Microsoft Office, and 5 vulnerability has been addressed in Microsoft.NET. So like I said before, the OS or applications affected are the Microsoft Windows, Microsoft Office, Microsoft Internet Explorer, and Microsoft.NET. Let's take a detailed look at each one. Microsoft Windows. The vulnerabilities addressed here are critical and important, and not patching them will cause security feature bypass, spoofing, remote code execution, elevation of privilege, information disclosure, and denial of service. So these are the components that caused the vulnerability. Crypt32.dll improperly validates elliptic curve cryptography certificate. So this is the component that caused the vulnerability in the crypto API vulnerability that we discussed earlier. Likewise, remote desktop gateway improperly handles connection requests. So this is a component that is responsible for the remote desktop bugs that we spoke about earlier. Likewise, we have the Win32k component, which improperly provides kernel information, and so on. Moving forward, these are the CVE IDs of the vulnerabilities in Windows. I'm going to pause for a few seconds in this page. You guys can take a quick note of these vulnerabilities, or you can take a screenshot of them. In case you're not able to get them, feel free to drop a query in the chat box, and our panel will get to you about this. Moving forward, we have the exploit assessment. So if an attacker successfully exploits this vulnerability, he could use a spoofed code signing certificate to sign a malicious executable. He could execute code with elevated permission. He could install programs, view, change, or delete data, and so on. Next up, we have Microsoft Office. So the vulnerability addressed here are of the severity level important. And if not patched, they can cause security feature bypass, remote code execution, spoofing, and information disclosure. So the components that contributed to the vulnerability are Microsoft Excel failing to properly handle objects in memory, Microsoft Office Online incorrectly validating origin and cross-origin communications, and so on. So these are the CVE IDs of the vulnerabilities in Microsoft Office. Moving forward, we have the exploit assessment. If an attacker is to successfully exploit this vulnerability, he could run an arbitrary code in the context of the current user. He could stop target systems from responding. He could orchestrate cross-origin attacks on affected systems. Or he could install programs, view, change, delete data, or create new accounts with full user rights. Moving on, we have Microsoft Internet Explorer. There was only one vulnerability that was addressed this Patch Tuesday, and it is of the critical nature. Not patching it will cause remote code execution, and the CVE ID is CVE 2020-0640. The component that contributed to this vulnerability is Internet Explorer improperly accessing objects in memory. So this is a memory corruption vulnerability. If an attacker successfully exploits this vulnerability, he would gain the same user rights as the current user. Next up, we have Microsoft.NET. The vulnerabilities are of the critical and important nature, and not patching them will cause a denial of service and remote code execution. The components that contribute to this vulnerability are ASP.NET Core improperly handling web requests, .NET software failing to check the source markup of a file, and so on. So these are the CVE IDs. As you can see, 4 of the 5 vulnerabilities addressed are critical in nature. So it is extremely important that you patch these vulnerabilities immediately. Moving forward, we have the exploit assessment. If an attacker successfully exploits these vulnerabilities, he would be able to install programs, view, change, delete data, or create new accounts with full user rights. He could also run arbitrary code in the context of the current user. With that, we come to the non-security Office updates released this Patch Tuesday. As you can see, updates for Microsoft Office 2016, Microsoft Outlook 2016, Skype for Business 2016, and so on have been released this Patch Tuesday. Following that, we have the third-party updates for Windows that have been released. We have Adobe Flash Player, Java 8 updates, and so on. We also have updates for Cerberus FTP Server, Google Drive, Simply Fortran, and so on. Not a lot of Mac updates have been released this Patch Tuesday. We only have updates for Mozilla Thunderbird for Mac and Adobe Flash Player for Mac. With that, we come to the end of discussion on Patch Tuesday updates. Now that we've taken a look at the updates, the next thing that we should do is to plan a strategy to deploy them successfully to your endpoints. Why should we do this? As we all know, the vulnerabilities have been increasing by the year and they don't seem to be slowing down. In such a situation, what you need in place is a good patch management solution. So what constitutes a good patch management solution? If you ask me, I would tell you that it should completely automate my patch management process. It should be compatible in a heterogeneous environment with a variety of OSs or operating systems. I should be able to deploy these patches at a time of my convenience. Further, I should be able to test these patches for instability in my working environment. And lastly, I would like reports, extensive and detailed reports of all the above mentioned steps. If you have the same criteria for a good patch management solution, look no further. ManageEngine's Desktop Central and Patch Manager Plus provide all this and a lot more. Let me show you how Desktop Central and Patch Manager Plus achieve all of this. Like I said, it is very tedious to manually patch every single endpoint in your working environment. So we need a solution that can completely automate this process. And that is exactly what Desktop Central and Patch Manager Plus do for you. How do we do this? By using the Automate Patch Deployment tasks. Let me take you to the product console to explain this further. So right now, I'm in the product console of Patch Manager Plus. If you are a person who is using Desktop Central, don't worry. Desktop Central's patch management module has the same features of Patch Manager Plus and a lot more like OS deployment, asset management, and so on. So this page of Patch Manager Plus looks like. You have graphs that show the network status and the system health, and so on. On the right-hand side, you have the latest security news displayed. So let me show you on how you can create an automated patch deployment task. Let's call it APD for convenience from now on. So click on Deployment. And on the left-hand side, you can see the Automate Patch Deployment tab. So click on that. Right here are all the tasks that are already been running. So when you click on a task, you can see the description right here. Now I'm going to show you how to create a new task. So right there you have the Automate task. So click on it and select the platform that you want your task on. So I'm going to select Windows. Once I select that, I'll be taken to a screen like this. So you can name your task. I'm going to call it Patch Tuesday or PT. Let's call it that. Once you save that, you can see there are 4 steps to creating an APD task. The first step is to select your application. So you can select Microsoft updates or third-party updates as you wish. Let us say we want to create an APD task for only security updates that are critical and important. So you can just click on this and click on security updates. Since I need only critical and important, I'm unchecking the rest of it. You have an option to patch all applications, or you can patch selectively by selecting patch specific applications or patch all applications except a few. In this case, I'm going to patch all applications. Next up, we have the third-party updates. So here you have the same options. You can choose to patch updates of all kinds of severity, or you can choose to deploy updates of only critical and important nature. So I'm going to go with only the critical and important updates right now. Here also you have the option to patch all applications or to patch selectively. I'm going to go with patch all applications. Moving down, you have an option to select the antivirus updates. But I would suggest you to create a separate APD for antivirus updates because of the frequency at which they are released and the bandwidth consumption. Moving down, you have the deployment. So you can choose to deploy the patches after a particular number of days from release or after a particular number of days from approval. I'll be talking about test and approve in the upcoming slides. So I'm going to choose to deploy these patches after 2 days from release. So once you click next, you have to choose a deployment policy now. So you can choose from the policies that are already created. I'm going to go with the weekend policy. Or you can choose to create your own policy, a policy that suits your business requirements by clicking on this tab. So you can just click on create policy and create your own policy. So once you have selected the policy, you can see the deployment window and the days and weeks on which this policy will be deployed. So after that, when you move down, you can see an option for suspend task. APDs are performed iteratively. So whenever there is a missing patch that matches with the criteria that you have given in your APD, this task will start to perform. So if you want to suspend this task after a particular number of days, you also have the option to do that. You just have to select the day on which you want the task to be suspended. Let's say 31st of January. Once you click next, you have options to define the target. So you can choose from remote offices and domains. So I'm going to go with that. And you can choose the remote office or local office that you want this APD task to be deployed to. So I'm going to go with the local office. We also have filters which can be used to deploy these tasks to specific computers. So once you click on these filters, you can filter computers based on a lot of criteria. There's domain, site, organizational unit, and so on. Let's say I'm selecting IP address. Then once I enter the range of IP addresses, this task will be deployed to only computers that fall into this range of IP addresses. I can also choose to exclude target. Likewise, if I choose IP address and enter a range of IP address, this APD task will not be deployed to those targets that fall under the IP addresses that I mentioned here. So once that is done, I can click next. So the last step is to configure notifications. So you can choose to see the status of your APD task. You can just give notify here, and you can choose the frequency at which you want these notifications. You can also have the detailed report in the format of your choice. So once we've done that, we can give save. So as you can see, your task has been created and it is right here. You can open this task to see the details, all the details that we've selected. So that is how you create an APD task. I'm going to take you back to the presentation. So like we saw in the product console, there are 4 steps with which you can create an APD task. The first is to select applications. The second is to choose the deployment policy. The third is to define your targets. And the fourth is to configure notifications. So now that you've completely automated your patch deployment tasks, does your problem end there? What if the patches that you have deployed to your work environment misbehave? We have a solution for this too. Test your patches prior to bulk deployment in your work environment. I'm going to take you back to the product console to show how you can do this. So I'm back to the product console. Under deployment again, you have test and approve option right here. So this will automatically be in this option, automatically without testing. So once you want test and approve, you'll have to click here. And it asks what it has to be done for the existing patches. You can either choose to retain the approval status, or you can mark the patch as not approved. I'm going to choose to retain the approval status. Once we give save, this choice will be remembered. So as you can see, these are the test groups that have already been created. So when you click on it, you can see the details of the test group. So let's go back and create a new test group. So for a new test group, all you have to do is click on Add Group and choose a platform on which you want the test group. I'm going to go with Windows. You can choose a group that is already there, or you can choose to create a new custom group by clicking on the plus here. So you'll be taken to this tab and you can just give create a new group and create a new custom group. Once we have chosen the group, we will have to choose the applications that are to be tested on this group. So this part is pretty much like the APD task wherein we select the applications. So you have the security updates based on severity, and you have the non-security updates and the other roll-ups and service packs that you can choose from. I'm going to go with security updates, only the critical and important ones, and non-security updates. Again, you have the option to deploy it to all applications or test it on specific applications. So I'm going to go with all applications. The same can be done for third-party applications. So I'm again going to go with critical and important patches alone. And I'm going to go with all applications. The next step is to create a deployment setting. So like we saw with the APD, you can choose from the deployment options already available, or you can create a new deployment option. Once that is done, you can enable notifications. Once you move down, there is this mode for approving the tested patches. This is a very important section because this is how we have completely achieved in automating the testing process. So once you click this, the tested patches will automatically get approved after the X number of days that you specify right here. So if I say 5 days after the testing is done, the patches will automatically be approved after 5 days and will be deployed via an APD task if you have created one. So I'm going to give create. And as you can see, our test group has been added right here. You can edit this group if you want to make changes. So that is how we've achieved to completely automate the test and approve process. I'm going to take you back to the presentation. A good patch management solution should have flexible deployment policies. Only then you can deploy at times of your convenience with respect to your business restrictions. So I'm going to take you back to the product console and show you how you can create deployment policies. So under deployment, you can see an option for deployment policies right here. So click on that. These are the policies that have already been created. So to create a new policy, go to create policy. You can name this policy. After which, there are 4 steps to creating a deployment policy. The first one is to select a deployment schedule. You can either select a regular split, wherein you'll have to mention the weeks on which you want the deployment to happen and the days on which you want it to happen. Or you can go for a Patch Tuesday split up, in which case you'll have the weeks option in terms of Patch Tuesday. For instance, there's Patch Tuesday week, or the first week after Patch Tuesday, and so on. And you have days from Tuesday. So once you've selected that, you can set a deployment window according to your convenience. So once that is done, you can choose to initiate deployment at the system startup or the refresh cycle, or either of these, whichever happens first. Once that is done, you can go to the next step, which is the pre-deployment settings. We have options to automatically wake computers before deployment, and we also have options to download patches or software binaries during subsequent refresh cycles, so that during your deployment window, only the deployment takes place and time is not wasted in downloading these patches. So you can select either of these, after which we go to the third step, which is configuring user notification. We can choose to notify the user about the deployment that is about to happen. There are also options to allow users to skip deployment, in which case you also have options to force deployment after an X number of days if the user has skipped, or to initiate deployment if the system remains idle for a stipulated number of minutes. You can also choose to show the deployment progress on the client computers. Next up, we have the reboot policy. So you can choose to not reboot or shut down entirely, or you can choose to reboot. There are 2 options. You can either force reboot or you can postpone reboot. In force reboot, there are further options to reboot immediately after deployment or to specify a reboot time, in which case you will get to specify a time of your convenience. There are also options for if your computer misses the reboot window by chance. You can also choose to completely exclude reboot if it is a machine that does not require a reboot, or if it is a server that is running very critical applications. The same goes for shutdown. You have the very same options as you have for reboot. So you can specify a reboot or shutdown schedule of your choice. Once that is done, you can save this and your deployment policy will be saved. I'm going to take you back to the presentation. Some of us in our business environments run older softwares because they are compatible with some of our business applications. So in those cases, if you update those software, our business applications might misbehave or completely collapse. So what do you do in this case? I'm going to take you back to the product console and show what can be done using Patch Manager Plus. So back in the console, go to the Patches tab, and there's an option to decline patch right here. So once you click that, you have groups of computers to which patches have been declined right here. And to create a new group and decline patch, select this. So you can choose a target. You can choose a group that is already there, or you can choose to create a custom group. As for the patches, you can decline an entire family of patch, or you can choose to decline individual patches like this. Once you're done with that, you can give save, and your decline patch policy will be created. The patches you have declined will not be shown under the missing patches and will not affect your system health. Let me take you back to the presentation. Once all this is done, we would like to have extensive reports on everything that has happened so far. Patch Manager Plus has steps with which you can do this as well. So I'm going to take you back to the product console to explain in detail. We have a separate tab for critical vulnerabilities because we know how important it is to patch and prioritize these vulnerabilities. So under critical vulnerabilities, you can find all the vulnerabilities that have been termed as zero-day vulnerabilities right here. Apart from that, we have dedicated reports for all steps of our patch management process. You have predefined reports from which you can choose, or you can schedule reports and customize them. For instance, you can just give an add schedule report, and you can select the things that you want included in your report. For instance, if you want the declined patch summary, install patch, manage systems, etc., you can select all of that and schedule this report to be sent to you by specifying the email ID right here. So that is how we've got dedicated reports to keep you informed on everything that happens in the entire process. I'm going to take you back to the presentation now. So with that, we come to the end of our Patch Tuesday presentation. We have several products that offer very dedicated patch management processes, namely Desktop Central, Patch Manager Plus, Patch Connect Plus, and Vulnerability Manager Plus. We would be taking questions right now, so feel free to drop all your questions in the chat box, and our panel will get to it right away. Your feedback is extremely important for us to know what you would like improved in our presentation or added in our presentation. So take a few minutes off and please fill the survey form. Hope the session has been useful for you. Thank you for joining us at this session. You guys have been an amazing audience. For any further queries, feel free to contact me at karthika.s@zohocorp.com. Thank you once again.